What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so this week in Draining the Swamp, check this out. Appeals court invalidates firing protections at 2 independent agencies, folks. So Donald Trump's draining of the swamp, if you will, is going to continue, right? It's like a slow rolling train, if you will. You know, I don't understand. A lot of people, I've been seeing a lot of talk out there about a lot of people, they're pissed off at Donald Trump because what is Donald Trump doing? He's not doing anything that he said he was going to do. Well, you know what? It's almost like these people, they want to get out there and they want to discuss politics and have these conversations, right? And sometimes in-depth conversations about all kinds of nonsense, right? But it's like they don't read the news. They don't read the news whatsoever. Because, like, I was hearing Nick Fuentes talk about this the other day. Well, Donald Trump's, his mass deportation operation, what has he done with that? Like, have you not been paying attention to the news, my dude? Like, seriously, it's underway. He's doing what he can, but he's getting blocked at every single angle by the courts. The judiciary is literally stopping the Trump administration from conducting a mass deportation operation. And you're trying to blame that on Trump? It's like, it's not that they haven't tried, it's they're being blocked. The courts are stopping a lot of the deportations. And it's absurd. Like, he was also talking about National Guard being deployed. Have you not paid attention to the news, my dude? He's being blocked at every single angle. I so wish I could have been on that podcast I was watching. I could have just kind of intervened a little bit, like, hey, my dude, like, pay attention to news. Seriously, like, Donald Trump is doing what he can. Look, I get it. Donald Trump is not perfect. There are some aspects of the Trump 2.0 administration that I don't like, right? Once again, like I've been talking about the strikes down there in the Caribbean. Don't necessarily like that because I never advocate or condone murder, and that's essentially what it is. However, at the same time, he's taking out narco terrorists, and I really don't feel bad about that. Like the strikes in Iran. You know, on my non-interventionist side says, I don't like that at all because it looks like you're working at the behest of Israel on that. And I don't have any qualms with Israel. But once again, it looks like Israel said jump and Trump said how high. That's what it appears. I don't care what the motivating factor is. Look, I get it. We don't want nuclear proliferation, right? That's a bad thing. And it kind of seems like it's not concrete, but it appears that Iran is trying to build a nuke. I get it. You know, they were discussing all kinds of stuff, but, you know, Donald Trump is doing what he can do. You know, and then draining the swamp, like I said, with this issue. He's fired a lot of people already. A lot of people took the Fork in the Road initiative. Hey, good on them. Glad to see it. Just like with the 2 million self-deportations. For some reason, these mass deportation advocates, there's like, Donald Trump's not doing anything. Well, you know, he opened the taps. He took an app that was meant to give people asylum, right? So you could sign up for your asylum under the Biden administration. He took that and turned it into a self-deportation application, as a matter of fact. And 2 million, that's the government numbers. Now, once again, I'm not certain that those numbers are real, right? Because that sounds too good to be true. But even if half of that is real, even if they're 50% correct, that's 1 million self-deportations. That would put the government at 1.5 million deportations. Hey, look, we're on the path here. I would say that's mass deportations. That's in what? 11 months? 12 months? Almost a year, not quite a year. That's not bad. It's not bad at all. Donald Trump is doing everything he can. He's trying to go after the swamp monsters, which that's going to be my next video. The Letitia James and James Comey and these people, right? Look, a lot of people, I guess they were expecting Trump to come in and have the FBI just go arrest every Democrat or something. Like, are you serious with that? Did you really want him to just go arrest these people? You did not want Trump to go through the proper procedures in going after these swamp monsters? Like, we actually have to have crimes that we have evidence of to build a case to go after these people. You can't just go and arrest people. That's like a fascist dictatorship right there. You can't just do that. And I guess it's, from what it sounds like, that's what these people wanted, because from the way they're talking, right? Like, I agree. Look, I'm going to say I haven't listened to Nick Fuentes a whole hell of a lot until the other day. He did an interview with Steven Crowder, and I watched the whole thing. It was 2 hours, and I was shocked. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of shocked. I thought the dude was a racist, straight up. Appears he's not. Appears he's just been framed for a lot of that nonsense. He does seem to be a bit nationalist, but I don't see a problem with that. That's just America first, right? That's just wanting to put your country first. Look, I get it. Some people, they can take something like that and flip it on a dime on somebody and make somebody look like an evil person quite easily. When you're talking about, I would much rather put this nation before any others. Yes, I do agree with Steven Crowder on a lot of things as well, but not everything. I think that our nation is the best. We are the sole superpower, right? China's gaining a lot of ground on us, but they've got their issues as well. That to me seems like a damn deck of cards built into a house, and you've got a powerful hurricane about to blow it down. That's what it looks like to me. But also, from all the news I've been reading, the United States has its problems too, folks. We kind of appear to be like a card house as well. You know, we've got some major issues. You know, we cannot seem for the life of us, folks, to balance our budget. Like most countries in the world can do this. Why can't we do this? Compassion, I guess, but it's insane. Let's get into this because, once again, I love this right here. I love this because the executive branch has the authority to fire anybody that it deems necessary to fire. Right? If the government cannot afford to pay its employees, those employees must go. And that's how I'm looking at this thing. You know, a lot of these activist judges and these liberals, they're like, oh, well, it's just Trump getting revenge on Democrats. Well, no, not necessarily, is it? Because we've heard story after story of people that voted for Trump that got fired from the federal government. Hey, look, you knew that's what he was going to do when he came into office. You got swept up in that. What, you thought he was going to go and fire just Democrats? Sorry that you had that idea in your head. Let's get into this. A federal appeals court on Friday found President Trump can fire leaders at 2 independent agencies without cause, ruling their removal protections unconstitutional. That is right, folks. The executive branch has authority over the executive branch. That is what this appeals court confirmed, or affirmed, if you will. The 2-1 panel on the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia said the restrictions on the president's firing power at the National Labor Relations Board, or NLRB, and the Merit Systems Protection Board, or MSPB, violate separation of powers. That is right, folks. You cannot have these rogue independent agencies out there just doing whatever the hell they want to do. It keeps Gwen Wilcox and Kathy Harris, Democratic members of the NLRB and the MSPB, respectively, out of their jobs. They have not been in their positions ever since the Supreme Court intervened in May. Trump fired Wilcox and Harris as part of a broader effort to eviscerate independent agencies, expanding presidential control over various regulators within the executive branch. I love that, folks. Once again, why can we not have news that is just news, that is not partisan slop? That's all that was partisan slop. What do you mean eviscerate independent agencies, my friend, and expand presidential authority? No, they affirmed that presidential authority. And he fired 2 people. You see how dramatic and over the top that is? Eviscerate independent agencies. It was 2 agencies. There are several independent agencies, as a matter of fact. And he fired 2 people, 1 from each. And somehow that is tantamount to evisceration. Sure, he's been firing a lot of people, but that hasn't eviscerated. Now, if you wanted to make the argument that the Department of Education has been eviscerated, I agree. That's a good thing, though. That is a good thing. These people are absurd, y'all. Like, the news is just getting so out of hand and so one-sided. This is supposed to be the Hill, right? Or this is the Hill. I'm sorry. This is the Hill, but it's supposed to be the Hill. A centrist news outlet that just gives you the facts. Centered around D.C., basically. Political news. The High Court has long permitted removal protections at certain federal agencies under a 90-year-old precedent, Humphrey's Executor v. United States. The agency must exercise quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative functions. Now, if you don't know what the Humphrey's Executor is, it was basically, I'm wanting to say it was when Franklin Roosevelt came in, he fired this guy. He was an FTC commissioner. Fired him. Boom. Got rid of him. Well, later on, the guy died not long after that, basically, and his executor sued the federal government because he fired him and he wasn't supposed to be able to. There was supposed to be some legislation put into place for protections for the independent agencies or whatever. And the executor of Humphrey's will, William Humphrey, by the way, the executor for his will, got back pay for like 3 years that he should have been at his job or whatever. It's a fascinating case, but that basically set precedent for, like it said, 90 years at this point. And, you know, that has basically been precedent. You know, that was just pertaining to that one issue. But, you know, these lower court judges have taken that case, as they usually do with precedent, and they take that and they rule based upon that. Well, that's what the lower court judges had ruled. Well, you can't do this. This is an independent agency, supposed to be. You can't fire these people, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, come to find out that, yes, you know, that violates the Constitution because the Constitution, Article 2, right, they lay these powers out for a reason in order. They put Article 1, that's the legislature, that's Congress and the Senate and all that. They lay that out right at the beginning. That's supposed to be the most powerful position, right? I know that they say co-equal branches, but they're not. We all know that they're not, folks. They're not co-equal. Article 2 comes next. The executive branch has a lot of power. And then Article 3 is the judiciary, which mitigates between the two, right? It mitigates other stuff too, but anyway, getting back to that. So, you know, you can't just take this precedent. You know, the executive branch has the authority over executive agencies, the executive branch agencies. He can fire these people. Absolutely. That's what the Constitution says. Because look, you got these people like at the FTC, right? You could have some rogue guy, and as long as he's not really screwing with the dollar and messing things up, right, and still going into work, he can do anything he wants to, and supposedly he can't get fired for that. If the president wants to go in a certain direction with our monetary policy, the president can't do ish about that. Nothing. It's insane. But maybe all of that will get overturned. And sure, it doesn't expand presidential power. It just affirms it, folks. That's all that does. When the justices in May allowed Trump's firings to move forward, they suggested that NLRB and MSPB wielded too much executive power to qualify. The appeals panel's decision Friday agreed. As explained below, the NLRB and the MSPB wielded substantial powers that are both executive in nature and different from the powers that Humphrey's executor deemed to be merely quasi-legislative or quasi-judicial, U.S. Circuit Judge Gregory Katsal wrote. So Congress cannot restrict the president's ability to remove NLRB or MSPB members, he continued. Katsal was joined by the majority by U.S. Circuit Judge Justin Walker, both Trump appointees. Once again, that is meant to poison the well, folks. That's all that's meant for. Oh, they're Trump appointees, so of course they're going to agree with Trump. He's got them under his thumb. It's insane, y'all. It doesn't matter. Trump appointees, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be Republican or conservative. I've explained that thousands of times, but for any new viewers here, that is a manipulation. That is a micro manipulation, because in case you don't know how that process works, you know, the president will nominate people to the bench from the other side, because if the states, the Senate, they are the ones that recommend people for lower court, federal judge, or even U.S. attorney or anything like this for certain districts, right? The Senate does that. If you have 2 Democratic senators and a Republican president, well, hang on just a second. Who is going to nominate anybody? Boom. You're going to get opposition people going into these offices under opposition executive branch, basically. So that is a manipulation. When they tell you it's a Trump appointee, it's a manipulation is all that is. The majority noted the cases do not concern other independent agencies, including the Federal Reserve, an issue that has loomed large in the legal battle. U.S. Circuit Judge Florence Pan, an appointee of former President Biden, in dissent said her colleague's decision suggests that no agencies can be independent. Yes, why should we have independent agencies, folks? I don't think we should. That, to me, spells out rogue agency. Although my colleagues attempt to couch their analysis in narrow terms, they redefine the type of executive power that must be placed under the exclusive command of the president and effectively grant him dominion over approximately 33 previous independent agencies, Pan wrote. No, but he does have the ability to fire people from those agencies. He doesn't have exclusive power over them. That's absurd. These people are insane, y'all. On Monday, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments over Trump's firing at the Federal Trade Commission, another independent agency. The case could prompt the justices to overrule the 90-year-old precedent in its entirety, and I hope they do. I hope they do, because, folks, look, we need accountability. We need somebody. We cannot have these independent agencies. Somebody has to be accountable to a boss, right? If you know what I mean by that. Basically, you look at it like this. The President of the United States is basically the CEO of America. That's how it is. It's set up like a business. They have services they provide to the American people, and we get money coming in that's kind of forced at gunpoint, if you will, but even still, we still buy into that system. You don't have to pay taxes. I know that might sound absurd to people like, well, that's the only 2 guarantees in life is death and taxes. Well, that's not true. The only guarantee in life is death. Because you don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to work. You could go and live off the land. That is a possibility. I know that would be rough living for most people, and so most people choose to buy into the system. Well, there it is. That's your choice. I choose to do the same thing. Hey, I like all the amenities of modern living, if you will. I love it. But look, somebody has to be accountable. These people don't have a boss, especially if you're at the top of one of these independent agencies. Trump has to be able to fire these people if they start acting up. If he wants to push the country in a certain direction, and he gets like the Federal Trade Commission, they say, no, and they fight the administration at every single angle, that's going to disrupt the executive branch in its entirety. Because now Donald Trump's having to take up issue with this and fight with this guy over here. He should be allowed to fire them. Like, look, maybe independent means that the president doesn't have direct control over their decision-making process. In other words, I get that. I totally get that. And I think that's how it should be for the most part, right? But look, he should be allowed to fire these people. The president doesn't need to butt in, micromanage these agencies or whatever. No, of course not. But if he wants them to go in a certain direction, like if he wants, Jerome Powell, too late Jerome, to lower the interest rate, if Donald Trump thinks it's a good idea, then Jerome Powell should do everything within his power to make that happen, right? Not saying that he should just do it. But, once again, that's why I caveated that with everything within his power to make that happen, right? Look at everything, and if it's possible to lower the interest rate or whatever, or, whatever policy it may be, he should at least try to bend to the will of his boss. That's what I think. But, and if he doesn't, Donald Trump should be allowed to fire this guy and put in somebody else. That's a good idea, if you ask me. Because, once again, these people can be taken out of their positions if they start acting up. when the next president comes in, this disrupts the cohesiveness of the executive branch, in my view. I'm just saying that's what it does, if you ask me. This is one reason why Trump's first term was such a disaster, right? I know it's a disaster, but it's not really a disaster. But based upon campaign promises, it was a disaster. That type of thing, based upon expectations, it was a disaster because he ran on draining the swamp, taking the money out of politics, going after the corruption and all that nonsense, and he didn't do any of those things. He tried, but he didn't succeed. And why is that? Because of independent agencies telling him no, and people within the federal government fighting against their boss, essentially. I don't think that's how this country should run. Right? Same thing even under Biden, right? Of course, people under Biden, they just bent to his will. That was an absurd administration if I've ever seen one, folks. That was the worst administration in American history, hands down, bar none, right? Bar freaking none. But I think I've rambled on for long enough. Y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. That is all I've got. I wish I had more. But don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click the join button and all that good stuff and help this channel grow. But folks, look, God has a plan for everybody. And he loves each and every one of you out there. So just pray to God for anything and everything. Pray for peace. Pray for some social cohesiveness in this country, because Lord knows we need it right now. We need people to come together, because we're way too bifurcated, if you will. But that's all I got. Y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.